How's it going tonight? I just thought I would talk about the Second World War, what it cost to win that war for the so called good guys, and also what the consequences of winning the war are. We decided that we were going to turn a German Polish border dispute into a world war. And the thing about that is the media back then, they were not interested at all in talking about the German side of the conflict. And by that, I mean, after the end of World War One, all of the areas that Germany lost, they didn't just magically shapeshift and transform into, you know, Czech or Slovak cities. They didn't transform into Polish cities and Polish people. They were still German, and they didn't want to live under a foreign occupation and a foreign government. They wanted to be back in Germany. They wanted to be with their countrymen. I mean, if I were to tell you that the Chinese have invaded and occupied Texas and California, would you call the United States aggressors and expansionist for fighting to take that territory back? No, you wouldn't. But that's the power of propaganda. You have been trained to see the Germans in a totally different light and hold them to a totally different standard than you would anyone else. So, the result of which is the media made it seem as if, Hitler and his allies were out to conquer the galaxy when he was offering peace constantly. And after the lightning success in the Ardennes campaign and the fall of Paris, the French government fled to London and they made Philippe Pétain the prime minister of France. And he went and he made an armistice with Germany and made peace with Germany. And while the United States under Franklin Roosevelt was talking about how they were interested in peace and preserving peace, secretly he offered to double his aid to France if they continued to fight Germany and if they didn't, sign a peace treaty and the armistice. That's what Franklin Roosevelt was doing. He was double dealing. And he also ordered the United States Navy to attack German and Italian ships on sight without a declaration of war. um, his intention was, despite his campaign promise of your boys will not be going to fight and die in some foreign war, he was doing everything in his power to get America involved in the Second World War against Germany. And when he realized that Hitler and Mussolini were not going to respond to his provocations, he changed his efforts and he changed his tactic to target Japan. And what he did was he organized a oil and steel embargo against the Empire of Japan and used his influence to threaten smaller countries into joining the embargo, threatening them by calling in loans and economic reprisals and that sort of thing. And I don't know how other countries see it, but the United States would view an embargo as an act of war. So Japan, they, they didn't just, we're told that they attacked Pearl Harbor in some kind of sneak attack, and that's not true. They tried to meet with Roosevelt multiple times, and when it became clear that they were being stonewalled, he or they sent us an ultimatum that said, if within X amount of days, you do not normalize relations with us, we're going to be in a state of war. And all this was kept from the public. And there was actually a military officer. I forget. I'll have to pull up his name. I'll put it in text later. But he said that the Japanese would have no choice but to attack the United States. He even specifically stated Pearl Harbor as what would be their choice of a target to attack. And he even went so far as to accurately point out what route they would take. And FDR had him court-martialed, which technically was his right, because if you're in the military, you're not allowed to, um, go to the press with anything like that. But the man, regardless, was a patriot. Anybody that wants to, prevent an all-out war is a patriot, because FDR and his sons, they're not going to be fighting and dying in war. That's just that's something that only us peasants do. But so that's how we got the United States involved in the war. And it wasn't the smartest choice for Italy and Germany to declare war on the United States, but they figured that if they did that, then Japan might open up a second front against Stalin, which of course they didn't do. And much to their regret, they shouldn't have attacked the United States. They should have attacked the Soviet Union. And rather than bring an entirely new great power into the war, they should have just focused on one first. So World War II, 60 million people dead. And Poland, the country that supposedly was the justification for war against Germany, was not liberated. Poland was made into a vassal state, a slave state of the Soviet Union after the war. In fact, the Soviet Union invaded Poland roughly the same time as Germany started hostilities. But Churchill and France, they didn't declare war on Stalin. And they ended up allying with Joseph Stalin, and that's why they were pushing what the British Ministry of Intelligence called atrocity propaganda. And what I mean by atrocity propaganda is they had to come up with any kind of reason to convince the population that they were the good guys. But that's what they did. That's why they invented, the so-called war crimes. And because they had to, wash their hands of the fact that they allied with Stalin. But so that's just the way it ended up being. So we didn't get anything good out of that conflict. Half the world's population ended up enslaved under communism. 80 plus million people died under different communist dictators. And that's why we're constantly reminded about the 6 million figure in Spielberg movies, because we have to justify, the cost in gaining that so-called victory. And it's just, food for thought. Was it worth it? And are we better off today? And the answer to that is no. The democratic Republican system and the communist system were old, and they were only interested in serving the interests of few. But National Socialism in Germany actually was successful in eliminating class distinctions. There were no more aristocratic Germans. They were all one class, they were all equal. And they eliminated unemployment, and they had an economy that worked. They even used Henry Ford's idea of profit sharing. Once a company made X amount of profit, anything above that, they would disseminate amongst the rest of the workers in the company. And they couldn't have that. And they also eliminated the middleman. They didn't need international financiers making deals. they directly bartered goods with other countries, and they were threatened by that because these international bankers, we all know who they are, they make money off of money, and they didn't need them anymore, and everybody was better off for it. And so they had to do everything in their power to stop the National Socialist system, because people were starting to wonder, we won World War One. Why is it that we're in the Great Depression, we're miserable, while Germany lost World War One and they've bounced back under this guy named Hitler? What is he doing differently? And they couldn't have people asking those questions and starting to think deeply. They can't have critical thinking like that going on, and they need to just convince people that World War II was this, Lord of the Rings style battle of pure good versus pure evil, and that's just not the case. But kind of keeping it short this time. But yeah, take care, and hopefully this will give you a little bit more to think about. Take care.